The water came out of the mountain cold enough to make your teeth ache, and it had been running through a stone box and a bed of charcoal that cost less than a bag of chicken feed. By the end of this video, you will know how to locate a spring on your land, build a collection box with local materials, and filter water through 3 simple layers that strip out bacteria and sediment. We are going to walk a hillside in Appalachia, then down to the creek gravel, then into your own kitchen. Skip this, and you keep paying $1,100 a year for municipal water that federal tests show carries PFAS in 45% of the systems in America. The real trick is why that stone box can keep water clean for 50 years without a single moving part. That opening detail is not a metaphor. Families up in the hollers of West Virginia and eastern Kentucky used to tap mountain springs with nothing more than rocks, a shovel, and a piece of clay pipe. Their water had no pump, no power line, no monthly bill, and no industrial filter cartridge to replace. When outsiders tested those old spring boxes in the 1970s, the water came back cleaner than most city tap water today. The reason is not magic. It is gravity, geology, and a layered stone and charcoal filter that works on the same principles as a modern water treatment plant, just slower and with no electricity. The cost for a complete system, using materials you can gather from your own land, runs from $0 to $30. Now, before we start digging, we need to sit with one uncomfortable fact about the water you probably drink right now. The United States Geological Survey published a study in 2023 that found PFAS, the so-called forever chemicals, in 45% of municipal water systems across the country. That means nearly half of the tap water coming out of American faucets contains at least one of those synthetic compounds linked to liver damage, thyroid disease, and certain cancers. And the average American household now pays $1,100 a year for that privilege, according to the American Water Works Association in 2024. Mountain families solved this problem 150 years ago without a laboratory, without a single test kit, and without a single dollar sent to a utility company. So here is the gap this video is going to fill. Most off-grid water advice today tells you to buy a $400 reverse osmosis unit, or to stockpile bottled water, or to dig a well that needs a submersible pump and a generator. Those all work until the power goes out or the money runs short. What Elias Yoder never covered in his 15 validated outliers is the simplest gravity-fed water system ever built by families who had no other choice. The Appalachian Spring Box is a collection vault built directly over the point where groundwater emerges from a hillside. It captures the water before it touches surface contamination, and then a 3-layer filter made of gravel, sand, and charcoal polishes it without a single moving part. Let's start with the first skill, and it is the one most people get wrong. You cannot build a spring box unless you can locate a real spring. A real spring is not a wet spot in your yard. It is groundwater that has traveled through porous rock and found a crack or a layer of clay that forces it out onto the surface in a steady, year-round flow. In Appalachia, old-timers looked for a line of green that stays bright in a dry August, a patch of moss on the north side of a rock face, or a trickle that never freezes solid in winter. If water seeps out of the ground after a rain and dries up a week later, that is a seep, not a spring, and it will not support a family. Walk the land early in the morning after a week of dry weather. Look for watercress, jewelweed, or a dense stand of skunk cabbage growing in the middle of a dry slope. Those plants need constant water at the root zone, so their presence marks a spring line even if the surface looks dry. Another sign is a line of iron bacteria, a reddish-orange slime on rocks where water has been flowing for years. Once you find the spot, dig a test hole about 3 feet deep and 2 feet wide. Wait 24 hours. If the hole fills with clear water and keeps filling even after you bail it out twice, you have found a live spring, not just a shallow pocket of rainwater. That is the only spot where your spring box belongs. Now we build the box itself. A spring box is basically a small, roofed vault, usually 3 feet by 3 feet by 4 feet deep, set right into the hillside at the point where the water emerges. The back wall stays open to the spring eye. The side walls guide the water forward, and the front wall holds a discharge pipe near the top. The box can be built from local stone laid with a thin mortar of clay and lime, or from poured concrete if you have a few bags of mix. In the old days, families used flat stones from the creek and stacked them without any cement at all, letting the water pressure and the weight of the hill hold everything in place. Here's the first trick of the spring box that most people miss. You do not seal the bottom. The floor of the box should be left as natural gravel, or a bed of coarse sand, not concrete. The water rises up through that floor from the spring vein below, already filtered by 50 or 100 feet of mountain rock. If you pour a concrete floor, you block the spring's natural path and force the water around the box instead of into it. The only concrete you need is around the top edge and the front wall, just enough to keep surface water and small animals from getting in. The cover needs a tight-fitting lid, often a slab of stone or heavy wood so no leaves, rodents, or surface runoff can drop into the clean water. Then comes the discharge pipe. You want a 1-inch or 1.5-inch pipe, ideally galvanized steel or food-grade PVC, set into the front wall about 4 inches below the top of the box. The pipe slopes downhill again toward your house at a steady fall of at least 1 foot of drop for every 40 feet of distance. That is 1/4 of an inch per foot, which gives the water enough momentum to travel without pushing the pipe off its joints. Since the spring box sits higher than the house, or at least higher than the point of use, the water flows by gravity. No pump, no pressure switch, no check valve. Just the weight of the water column above the pipe doing all the work. That pressure has a number you can calculate. Every 2.3 feet of vertical drop gives you 1 pound per square inch of pressure. So if your spring box sits 100 feet above your kitchen faucet, you get about 43 pounds per square inch. That is more than enough to run a shower, fill a washing machine, and push water through a basic filter. If the spring is only 30 feet above the house, you get about 13 psi, which is weak, but still usable for a gravity-fed sink or garden tap. And before you ask, no, a spring box cannot produce pressure higher than the drop you have. You cannot cheat gravity. You can only use the hillside you were given. Let us pause for a major reveal. The reason an Appalachian spring box can deliver clean water for decades without a replacement filter is not that mountain water is pure. It is not. As groundwater moves through rock, it picks up dissolved minerals, some good and some bad. The real secret is that the spring box deliberately slows the water down. Instead of shooting out of the hillside in a fast jet that stirs up sediment, the water pools inside the box for hours or days. During that time, any fine silt settles to the bottom, and the coldest, clearest water floats to the top where the discharge pipe draws from. The box is not a filter on its own. It is a settling tank and a shield against contamination from the surface, and that shield is the second part of the trick. The box itself is sealed against everything above ground. No sunlight, no leaves, no animal waste. No runoff from a pasture uphill can get inside once the lid is on. A spring that pours out openly on the hillside can be contaminated by a deer walking through it or a storm washing topsoil into the flow. The box eliminates that entire category of risk before you even build a filter. That is why old spring boxes tested cleaner than nearby streams, even when the family had no filter at all. The geology does the first job, the box does the second job, and the 3-layer filter we will build after this does the third. And let me show you how to build the box step by step with materials you can gather in a single afternoon. First, mark a square 3 feet by 3 feet around the spring eye. Dig down 4 feet, but do not line the bottom with anything except a 6-inch layer of washed creek gravel. Stack your largest flat stones around the edges as the walls, overlapping them like bricks. If you use concrete, mix it 1 part cement, 2 parts sand, and 3 parts gravel, and only fill the gaps between the stones. Leave the back side, the uphill side, partially open so the spring can seep into the box from the ground behind it. Do not close off that side completely or you will starve the system. As you build the walls, set your discharge pipe into the front wall at the proper height before the concrete or stone sets. The pipe should be level across the width of the box, or even tilted 1 degree upward from the back to the front, so you draw only the top layer of water, never the sediment on the floor. Then build a small overflow pipe on the opposite side of the front wall, a little lower than the discharge pipe, so that in a heavy rain, the box never floods over the lid. The overflow pipe can be as simple as a 2-inch pipe leading to a gravel-filled trench downhill. That overflow is not a waste. It keeps the spring box from backing up and forcing muddy surface water into the lid seam. Now the lid. The cheapest and most traditional lid in Appalachia is a slab of sandstone or slate, cut or broken to fit over the top, heavy enough that a raccoon cannot move it. If you have no stone, use 2 layers of pressure-treated plywood with a sheet of plastic between them, then pile 6 inches of dirt on top. The dirt insulates the box in winter and hides it from animals and curious neighbors. The lid must overlap the walls by at least 3 inches on every side, and the seam should be sealed with a bead of clay or a strip of rubber gasket. A tight lid is what separates a spring box from a mud puddle. Leave a small screened vent on the downhill side, no bigger than a pencil, so condensation can escape. Once the box is built, before you connect anything to your house, let it sit for 2 full weeks. This is the step impatient builders skip, and then they wonder why their water is cloudy. The first week, the box will collect construction grit, bits of stone, and disturbed soil from the digging. Bail it out daily. The second week, the water should run clear, and you can pour a bucket of water mixed with a 1/4 cup of household bleach through the box to disinfect the walls and gravel. Then, let it flush for another 3 days. Only after those 2 weeks do you connect the discharge pipe to your house. That settling period is not optional. It is part of the build. Now let us follow the water down the hill. From the spring box, the pipe runs along the surface or just beneath it, following the contour of the land until it reaches your house. Bear in mind, this is a gravity-fed system. The pipe must never rise above the water level inside the spring box. If it does, the line will airlock and the flow will stop, because gravity cannot push water uphill through an air bubble. The old-timers called this laying the line like a lazy dog instead of a taut wire. Let the pipe sag gently between supports so that any small air bubbles collect at the low points and get flushed out the next time the flow surges. Do not run the pipe in a straight, tight line with sharp bends. Water hates sharp bends. For the pipe material, old Appalachia used hollowed logs, then clay tiles, then galvanized iron. Today you can use black polyethylene pipe, the same stuff used for rural water lines, because it does not shatter when the ground freezes, and it does not taint the water with plastic taste if you flush it first. 1-inch internal diameter is enough for a single household. But here's a critical detail. Lay the pipe at least 2 feet deep if you live where the ground freezes more than a day at a time. In a hard winter, a shallow line can freeze solid, and then your spring box becomes a useless ice cube until March. Insulate the exposed ends where the pipe enters the box and the house with old burlap or foam. Another old-timer's trick for the gravity line is to install a small standpipe, just a vertical piece of pipe that rises 6 inches above the main line every 100 feet. These standpipes work as air release valves. When a bubble forms in the line, it rises into the standpipe instead of blocking the flow. You can make one from a simple T fitting in a short capped section of pipe. No moving parts, no seal to replace. Place one at every low point or anywhere the pipe changes direction. This single detail solves the most common reason a gravity-fed spring system stops flowing after a few months. At the house end, do not connect the spring water directly to your drinking water faucet until you install the 3-layer filter we are about to build. The spring box alone is good, but it is not perfect. It can still carry fine sediment, a little iron, and the occasional soil bacterium that slipped past the gravel floor. The filter we need is not a store-bought cartridge with a membrane. It is a barrel or a series of barrels with layers of material sorted by size. And this is where the old Appalachian method converges with the Peace Corps water manual, which documented the same 3-layer filter for villages without electricity. Let us build a 3-layer filter. You need a food-grade barrel, or a large clay pot, or even a wooden box lined with plastic. The size does not matter much, but 20 to 50 gallons is the sweet spot for a family. The filter works from the bottom up, not the top down. That is the backwards part that trips people. You fill the bottom with coarse gravel, the middle with sand, and the top with a thick layer of crushed charcoal. The untreated water enters through a pipe at the bottom, rises through the gravel, then the sand, then the charcoal, and exits through a spigot at the top. The big particles settle in the gravel first, the sand catches the medium stuff, and the charcoal does the fine polishing. Here is the exact ratio for the layers, and you will want to write this down because most people get the order wrong. The bottom gravel layer should be 6 inches deep, made of stones the size of a marble, washed clean. Above that, a 6-inch layer of coarse sand, then a 6-inch layer of fine sand, then a 12-inch layer of activated charcoal crushed to the size of rice grains. Yes, that is 12 full inches of charcoal, not a token sprinkle. The charcoal is the powerhouse. It removes odors, tastes, and a surprising number of chemical compounds by adsorption. Adsorption, not absorption. The carbon surface grabs molecules like a magnet, and the longer the water sits against that charcoal, the cleaner it comes out. But wait, the charcoal must be activated, not just campfire coals. Activation means heating wood or coconut shells in a low oxygen environment until the carbon forms millions of microscopic pores. You can make it at home. The old Appalachian method used hardwood, usually oak or hickory. Burn the wood down to coals in a covered pit, then let those coals cool completely without smothering them in dirt. Then crush them and soak them in water with a handful of salt for a day. The salt helps open the pores. Is it as good as store-bought activated carbon? Not quite, but it gets close and it costs nothing. After the charcoal, you need a layer of fine cloth or a coffee filter on top to keep the charcoal dust from floating out through the discharge spigot. Then close the barrel with a tight lid. The inlet pipe enters the bottom of the barrel through a bulkhead fitting, and the outlet pipe exits the top. Water flows upward through the filter by gravity, slowly, giving the sand and charcoal time to do their work. The flow rate should be no more than a gallon per minute for a 50-gallon filter. If it runs faster, you are not filtering. You're just passing water through a wet box. Slow is good. Slow is what makes the filter work. And here's the answer to the big question we opened at the beginning. The reason the system keeps water clean for decades without a replacement filter is that the spring box already does the heavy work of sedimentation and surface shielding, while the 3-layer filter handles only the fine polishing. Because the water entering the filter is already clear of large debris and protected from animal waste, the charcoal and sand rarely clog. You do not have to replace anything. You maintain it once a year, which takes about 1 hour. Compare that to a modern reverse osmosis membrane that must be swapped every 6 to 12 months for $80 or more. This filter earns its keep by doing less, not more. Maintenance is brutally simple. Once a year in the fall after the leaves are down, drain the filter barrel and remove the top layer of charcoal. Wash the sand and gravel with clean water, or better, with a little of the spring water from the box. Then replace the charcoal with a fresh batch. Do not throw the old charcoal away. Crush it finer and use it in the garden where it becomes biochar and holds nutrients in the soil. That is the entire maintenance schedule. No filters to order, no membranes to unclog, no electricity to disconnect. The only moving part in the whole system is the water itself, and it has been moving downhill since before the mountains were named. But before you drink a drop from this setup, you must test it. The old families did not have test kits, but you do, and they are cheap. At a minimum, test for total coliform bacteria, E, coli, nitrates, and pH. You can mail a water sample to a certified lab for less than $40, or use a home test kit for about $15. Do not rely on taste. Water can taste cold and sweet and still carry a dangerous load of bacteria from a dead animal upstream. Spring water that is tested clean for a year can spike after a heavy storm if the lid was left open or a pipe cracked. So test twice a year, once in spring and once in fall. If your test shows bacteria, do not panic. The fix is not to abandon the system. The fix is either to boil the water before drinking or to add a simple ultraviolet lamp, but that uses power, or to install a slow sand filter with a biologically active layer. But the cleanest solution for most people is to pour the water through the 3-layer filter again, or to build a second barrel in series. The second pass will drop the bacteria count below detection in most cases. If the water tests high in iron, which is common in Appalachian well water, you can aerate it by letting it fall from a pipe in a thin stream into a storage tank. The iron oxidizes and settles out. And now we close the biggest open loop of this video. The question I planted at the start was why that stone box keeps water clean for 50 years without a single moving part. The answer is not one trick, it is a sequence. The mountain rock filters the water through hundreds of feet of sandstone and limestone. The spring box slows it down, shields it from surface filth, and settles out the rest. The 3-layer filter removes the last particles and most of the chemical contamination. And gravity moves the water from the hillside to your kitchen with zero energy. Once you build this sequence, it does not break because there is nothing to break. That is the whole secret. Now we shift to the second half of the system, collecting rain that falls on your own roof. Not every property has a spring, but nearly every roof in America catches thousands of gallons a year, and the law allows you to use it in 48 states. Only Colorado and Nevada have significant restrictions, and even those have changed in recent years. A complete rain catchment system for a small house can be built for $30 if you already have a barrel or a large trash can. And the water, if filtered through the same 3 layers, is soft, slightly acidic, and perfect for plants, laundry, and after treatment for drinking. Let's start with the math. A 1,000 square foot roof in a place with 40 inches of annual rainfall will catch over 23,000 gallons per year. That is enough to supply 2 people with all their household water, not just irrigation. The rule of thumb is 1 inch of rain on 1 square foot of roof yields 0.62 gallons of water. So a 10 foot by 10 foot section of roof catches 62 gallons from a single 1-inch storm. Now compare that to the $1,100 you pay now. A few barrels cost less than a month of that bill. The cheapest rain system does not need a gutter filter or a first flush diverter, though those help. The old Appalachian way was to set a wooden barrel under the roof drip line, then pour the water through a cloth into a second barrel. That cloth did little except stop leaves and bird droppings. The real work happened later in the 3-layer filter. But since you are building this now, you can add a simple first flush diverter for almost nothing. It is a length of pipe that captures the first 5 gallons of runoff from a dirty roof, which carries most of the bird poop and dust. After that diverter fills, the cleaner water flows into your storage barrel. For storage, avoid clear plastic containers that let sunlight in because sunlight grows algae. Use a dark barrel or paint the outside black or wrap it in an old blanket. Elevate the barrel on concrete blocks so you can fit a bucket or a hose under the spigot. Gravity will pressurize the water the same way the spring box does, though with less pressure, because the barrel is usually only 3 or 4 feet high. If you want to shower, set the barrel on the roof of a shed or a stand built of posts. Every 2.3 feet of height gives 1 psi, remember? A 10-foot stand gives about 4 psi, which is just enough to trickle through a shower head. Connect a downspout from your roof gutter to the top of the barrel. Use a screen made of fine mesh or an old nylon stocking over the inlet to keep out mosquitoes and debris. Mosquitoes are not just an annoyance. They lay eggs in standing water, and those larvae carry disease. A screen with holes smaller than 1/16 of an inch solves that. And if you want to store water for more than a week, add a tablespoon of unscented household bleach per 50 gallons. Or better, build the 3-layer filter next to the barrel and run the water through it before use. But do not drink untreated rainwater directly unless you test it and filter it the same way we did for the spring. Now here's a contrast that most people never hear. A modern municipal system treats water with chlorine, fluoride, and often chloramine. Then it pumps that water through miles of aging pipes, some of which have lead service lines. A rain barrel connected to a 3-layer filter gives you water with no chlorine, no lead from distribution pipes, and no monthly bill. But it also has no residual disinfectant, so it must be used or cycled within a few days during warm weather. The spring water has the same issue. That is why the old families kept a copper dipper or silver coin in the water bucket. Silver and copper are natural antimicrobials, and they actually work. Let me address the legal side quickly because someone will ask. Rainwater harvesting is legal in 48 states. In Colorado, you can now collect 2 110-gallon barrels for outdoor use, a rule that changed in 2016. In Nevada, residential collection was legalized in 2019. Every other state, including Alaska and Hawaii, allows it, and many offer tax credits for large systems. No state requires a permit for a single barrel under 100 gallons. So the only thing stopping you is the time it takes to set up a barrel and a screen. And if you want to drink that water, you still need the 3-layer filter and a test. The combined system, spring box, plus rain barrel plus 3-layer filter, is what a family in the mountains would have called a whole waterworks. The spring box handles the constant daily supply. The rain barrel catches the seasonal peaks and stores water for the garden and animals. The filter sits between both sources and the kitchen. If one source goes dry in a drought, the other can cover the gap. And because both are gravity-fed, the system runs through a power outage, a hurricane, a freeze, or a grid failure with zero change in output. That is the meaning of water security, and it costs less than a single monthly water bill. But the final truth, the deeper investigative one, is that the Appalachian well trick is not really about water. It is about taking responsibility for the one resource you cannot live 3 days without. Municipal water is convenient until the men with the lab coats find something they did not expect, or the bill goes up again, or the main line breaks. The families in the mountains had no backup, so they built a system that could not fail because it had no parts to fail. You have more money, more information, and more tools than they ever did, so there's no excuse not to build your own. Let's run through the complete build one more time as a single checklist. Find a live spring that flows in August. Dig a 3x3 box. Leave the floor as gravel. Build stone walls with a discharge pipe near the top. Cover it with a heavy lid and let it settle 2 weeks. Lay a gravity-fed pipe to the house with a steady downhill slope. Build a 3-layer filter. 6 inches gravel, 6 inches coarse sand, 6 inches fine sand, 12 inches charcoal. Connect the filter so water flows bottom to top. Test the water. Maintain the charcoal once a year. That is every step. No pump, no power, no bill. Now for the rain side, the checklist is even shorter. Put a dark barrel under a downspout. Screen the inlet. Optional first flush diverter. Elevate the barrel. Connect a spigot. Filter before drinking. Test twice a year. The entire rain catchment system can be running by lunchtime on a Saturday. And if you build the 3-layer filter once, you can use it for both spring water and rainwater, which means your total investment stays under $30 plus the cost of a barrel. A single barrel can pay for itself in one summer of watering a garden that would otherwise draw from the municipal tap. But there is one thing you should not do, and I need to say it plainly. Do not assume that because the water is cold and clear and comes from a mountain spring, it is automatically safe. That assumption killed people in the old days. The reason the old families rarely got sick from their springs is that the spring box and the filter were built correctly, and they lived with the system every day, watching the flow and the clarity. If a storm washed a deer carcass into the spring eye, they knew to clean the box. If the water smelled off, they dug a new spring. You need to adopt the same habit. Water safety is not a one-time build. It is a daily observation. So the next step after you finish this video is not to go buy pipes and barrels. It is to walk your own land, or the land of a friend, and look for a spring line. You do not need to own a mountain in Appalachia. Springs and seeps exist in every state, from the hills of Ohio to the pine flats of Georgia. Even a small spring that fills a 5-gallon bucket in an hour can supply a family with drinking water if you store it and filter it right. The volume does not matter as much as the consistency. A spring that runs all year is worth more than a well that costs $10,000 to drill. If you found this useful, then the next piece is the old Appalachian method for preserving meat without refrigeration, because the same families who built these spring boxes also knew how to keep a slaughtered hog through the winter using nothing but salt, smoke, and a dark corner. That is a separate skill, but it starts with the same mindset. The land already provides everything if you know where to look and how to listen. I will walk that process next time, from the first cut to the final smokehouse door. The mountain water does not care if you believe in it. It has been running clean through stone and charcoal for 10,000 years, long before the first water utility billed its first customer. All you have to do is put a box under it, add a layer of sand and crushed charcoal, and let gravity finish the job. And if you do that, you will never pay for a drop of water again. That is not a dream. That is a pipe, a stone box, and a hillside. Go find your hill.